Thanks so much, Brian.
Let me
Thank
hook
you.
you up.
Yeah. All right, so we're going from a lovely abstract description of pride to a more concrete one, perhaps a little strange. But if you know me or listen to that intro, it'll make a bit more sense. As you heard, I used to be a scientist, and now I call myself Philadelphia's leading expert on breakfast sandwiches. Yeah. It's not what my high school guidance counselor thought that I was going to be when I grew up. Turns out he didn't know much at all. I'm proud of what I've created for myself. I'm going to take you through a bit of this journey in a couple ways. So yes, pride via breakfast sandwiches. What else could I possibly be speaking about? So I'm going to walk through a bunch of ideas that connect all this for me. A bit over 5 years ago, my friend Adam came to me and he offered me a spot speaking at Ignite Philly. People familiar with Ignite Philly, 5-minute lightning talks? And Ignite came at a very interesting time in my career, right? So I'd left what I call career 1.0, and I was figuring out what was next for myself. I moved to Philly, and I wasn't sure. Should I go to grad school again? Should I work at a tech startup? Should I start a podcast? What was I going to do with myself? And so when Adam asked me very concretely, I thought to myself, I'm not in a position to talk about any of the work that I'm doing. And a trusted advisor said to me, why don't you think about something that you really care about and that you want to be known for? And it came to me that it was breakfast sandwiches. This is some years ago now. I'm going to back up a little bit more. This is not the only LinkedIn profile that you're going to see in today's talk. Well, not the only slide of it, I should say. Pete Vandersteer. I'm assuming none of you are familiar with him. That's fine. Pete and I went to high school together, and then we interned right as we were starting college. And why is Pete interesting today? Well, Pete and I, we worked about 10 feet from each other, and every morning he would turn to me and say, Neil, why don't we go down to the cafeteria and get breakfast sandwiches? And I was 18 years old, and I could eat 7,000 calories a day. And I'd already had first breakfast, and it was time for second breakfast, honestly second and third, because I would have 2 breakfast sandwiches in one sitting with Pete. Should also point out I was not a paid intern, and so my time was my own. But I thought of Pete and how, that kicked off an interest in, just enjoying breakfast in a way that I never really had before. And breakfast sandwiches, they're fairly simple in a lot of ways. And boy, have I thought about how to display this slide or variations on it. If you're a data viz person, let's talk more later. If you're a computational models person, I have other thoughts and questions. When I'm talking about a breakfast sandwich, I'm talking about basically an egg sandwich or an egg substitute for the non-egg eaters in the room, who I acknowledge more. And this is imperfect, right? But just kind of grounding ourselves in the concrete aspects of what I'm talking about with breakfast sandwiches. I stared at this slide that I'd made some time ago, and I was like, TO toppings. What are TO toppings? Tomato and onion, of course. We'll discuss lettuce later. So I'd moved to Philly in 2013. 2016, this is pre-Ignite. One day I said, why don't I just explore what this town has? So I posted on Facebook, which was the custom at the time. And I said, who's got breakfast sandwiches for me? Who's got recommendations? I knew where all the IPAs were. I knew where to drink the coffee. But where were the breakfast sandwiches? And not that many people liked this, but a lot of people had comments. I was doing something right. And so, yeah, oh boy. So I took people's suggestions and I created a map of breakfast sandwiches of Philadelphia, a Google map, if you're not familiar with the product. I've recently alphabetized it for easy sorting. We'll come back to this concern later. But yeah, I thought, why not just keep track of where they are and who's got what? So one of the things I love, in addition to the simplicity, is the variation possible. And this begins the sequence of a lot of photos of breakfast sandwiches. So I'm really glad everybody had a bagel with a schmear this morning. Yeah, you can get them on buns. You can get them on a bagel with tater tots on the side, and I guess that was ham. I lived in Rochester, New York for a while. Not a great town for breakfast sandwiches, but it's there. The Penrose Diner offers pork roll. This is a newer wouldn't say interest of mine, but acquired taste of about 2 pork roll egg and cheeses a year. And I'm always interested, who offers pork roll and how do they make it work? This is a place called Rocky's in Millwood, New York. This is called their hashtag, and it comes with a hash brown and also a chicken cutlet inside, in addition to bacon, egg, and cheese. I have about 2 of these a year as well when I really need them. The Biscuit Lady. Anybody know about the Biscuit Lady in Philadelphia? Right? She's doing biscuits out of this place, Lucky's Trading Company in Manioc Roxborough. This is a peanut butter and jelly bacon, egg, and cheese. A PB&J BENC, if you will. That sink in. New and delightful. Middle Child, also very fluffy eggs, worth a visit if you've never been. We'll get back to them. And right, there's innovation happening in the breakfast sandwich sphere, is what I like to say. Sounds very pompous, but it's true. Right, so this is the Patchunk Bagels spot. They named the Philly Special at some point after the Super Bowl. So lots of things are happening. There's developments. And yet, wherever I go, their breakfast sandwiches are. This is a recommendation in San Juan from my friend Christina, who's here. Thank you for looking out for my travel breakfast sandwich needs. New Orleans, of course, there's great food there. Do not eat the breakfast sandwich at the airport in Saginaw, Michigan. I've been thinking a lot recently about how many sandwiches look good but do not taste good. Some sandwiches taste good but do not look good. And then I also think about my own photography skills and how I need to learn a little bit more about how to take photos of breakfast sandwiches. A work in progress, like me. If you're at the shore, Johnny's pork roll truck does pork roll sandwiches all day long. What a gift to humanity. The famed White House Subs in Atlantic City is a wonderful, we'll call it a Saturday morning sandwich, if you will. And then sticking more locally, Gilda up in Fishtown does a great job with this is their, oh boy. It's the Antonio. It's a house-made sausage, Portuguese style with, I forget what they call the sauce, but it's like an herby aioli. Speaking of sandwiches that do not look good, Rocco's at Home Depot is a dark horse. The sandwiches often look horrible. They look like this every time I try to take a picture of one, sitting in my car in the Home Depot parking lot on a Thursday morning at 11, thinking, how have I done this to myself again? It looks terrible, tastes great. Right, there's, talking about variation locally, there's andouille sausage over at Reading Terminal Market, where I'll be after the talk. Vincenzo's in South Philly, quiet, almost anonymous seeming little deli. And of course, Artisan, Boulanger, Patissier, my French is terrible. Wonderful work on a croissant. There's also a little place called Wawa that I've heard of. I've tried their breakfast panini. It is not good. I do not think that they're going to survive. Right? And then I honestly, part of the joy is I just get to keep exploring even in my own neighborhood. I live a couple blocks from this place called Avenue Steaks. And I learned that they do breakfast 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., but also 4 p.m. to 3 a.m. It's breakfast sandwiches at almost all of the hours of the day that I'm awake, and that pleases me enormously. Now, breakfast sandwiches are also a great thing for sharing with people in all sorts of different ways. Emma Fried Casorla used to run Philly Love Notes. This might track for people who were here about 6-7 years ago. She had a newsletter about great things happening in Philly, and she called my Google map the most important Philly map of all time. Take that, William Penn. My friend Laura works in academic publishing, and so for I believe it's the Society for History of the Early American Revolution conference, she made sure that historians coming to Philadelphia knew where to get breakfast sandwiches. 2,000 engagements or whatever this is on Blue Sky really charmed my socks off. Because who knew early American Revolution historians cared about breakfast so much? This map has been viewed 27,000 times. It was meant to be viewed approximately 10 times just by me. And this isn't meant as a brag, it's just like a curious, how are all these different people finding it? What are they looking for? I don't get a ton of feedback on it necessarily from strangers. Occasionally I'll get a suggestion. But it fascinates me that this simple thing, right? I used a free tool. I was just doing this as a lark, came through. One of my great moments in my presence as a breakfast sandwich speaker came up some time ago. It's about 2018. I was invited to speak at Nerd Night in Baltimore. And R. Eric Thomas, Creative Mornings speaker, Philadelphian, wrote about my talk in his newsletter the following week because the debate got so heated after my talk. A man asked if a tuna fish sandwich qualified as a breakfast sandwich. If any of you do that, you'll be thrown right out on Art Street, because I've had enough of that in my breakfast sandwich talk life. Anyways, wonderful, just the sort of email I read when I'm having a rough day. And right, this connects me to people. Trevor Babb, an old friend of mine, so old that I'd never gotten text messages from him before, texted me one day out of the blue and said, "Come to New Haven, Connecticut. There's breakfast sandwiches here." Okay, great. Hope you're doing well, Trevor. This brings us back to Pete's LinkedIn profile. Remember Pete, my internship buddy? Pete and I spoke last in 2001. Sorry, 2001. God, how the time flies. 2001. And then apparently Pete was just sitting around one day Googling me and reached out on LinkedIn. We had not been connected on LinkedIn when he sent this, by the way. And he had found that YouTube and says, "I hope that's me," because I had just said, "my coworker, Pete." And it's just like the sweetest little outreach. We don't have a lot to connect about these days. I would love to have breakfast with him again, but like it just brought us back together in a very goofy way. And this brings me back to my documenting. I have an obsession with tracking my breakfast sandwiches, as you've probably figured out, right? But this is so fun to me. I have about 150 named files in this directory of different sandwiches that I've eaten. But then you'll see there's an unnamed folder where, gosh, I have to track down where all these were. Now, this is actually a place where Google Maps, their timeline feature comes in handy, because Google always knows where you are. And so if you have a timestamp on your breakfast sandwich photo, you can go to your Google Maps timeline and say, oh, at this time, I was probably at Hive on Broad Street, right? This is what I do when I'm not working a professional job. And then it became a professional job for me in a way. My friend Kaylani Palmisano, who's a local food writer personality, she reached out to me, this is like spring 2022, and said, "Hey Neil, the Inquirer food editor is looking for particular things this summer. They're specifically looking for a breakfast sandwiches guide. Can you write about it? I know that you can speak about it." And I said, "Kaylani, I have been studying for this for years. I filled out a Google form, and several thousand words later, and several thousand calories later as well, and some very rough mornings where I did a double meal, I had done all the research I needed to be included on the front page of the Inquirer, right under a wildfire and right above the flyers." It gets better. Seeing my work promoted on the front page of the Inquirer honestly was a prouder moment for me than finishing college or grad school. I think my mom actually enjoyed this and talked to her friends about it, which is a rare treat. And it just blew my mind that this was possible, because one day I said, you know what I actually really love? Breakfast sandwiches. So yes, this is not a career. It is a hobby that I've taken maybe a little too seriously. But as far as identities go, I'm really proud of something that I've built, because its success doesn't look like anything that I'd prepared for. It wasn't what was presented to me as a kid or guided by mentors as an adult. It was something that I just got really curious about, and I just kept opening doors. And I kept saying, what's happening next for me? Yes, this is a wedding photo. My friends Lizzie and Luis got married in Punta Cana, Dominican Republic, a couple weeks ago. And at the reception, a man came up to me and said, "Are you the guy who wrote the breakfast sandwiches article?" And that is how I went from being Philadelphia's leading expert on breakfast sandwiches to Philadelphia's most internationally recognized leading expert on breakfast sandwiches. But maybe it's not breakfast sandwiches for you, right? Maybe it's pancakes, or maybe it's ice cream, or maybe it's a particular graffiti artist. I hope that you have a sense of what that is for you, that just sparks joy and lets you find new things and explore. And if you want to catalog them like a wild person like I do, by all means. If you're really into cataloging things, maybe we can talk about if I should be using Notion and not just Google Maps to track it. That's a whole conversation for another time. But yeah, I want you to find your equivalent of breakfast sandwiches and be proud of that. I also really want us to eat breakfast sandwiches together. I love meeting new people. That's how I ended up in this situation. I'm on Instagram where, yep, I post breakfast sandwiches, folks. Also, my wife sometimes. The top 10 URL is for the Google Map version of things. The Inquirer link is below. I hope you subscribe to the Inquirer, by the way. You should support local journalism. How about a plug for that? Yeah, that's how I'm proud of breakfast sandwiches. Probably not a talk that any of you expected to see this morning, but boy, am I glad that you came out and got to hear me talk about it. Thanks so much.